In the fall of 2009, Brett Rogers was one of MMA's most intriguing prospects. An unbeaten run of first-round knockouts saw him join the top echelon of the heavyweight division and later form part of one of the biggest fights in the sport's history. The rise, however, came with a spectacular fall, as legal issues and a jump in competition sent the Chicago fighter's career into a terminal decline. Today, we look at how the Grimm's MMA tenure turned similarly bleak. Welcome to the INC, and today we ask the question, what happened to Brett Rogers? Brett Rogers' fall from the top was made even more tragic by the struggle he went through to get there in the first place. Rogers was raised in northwest Chicago in the infamous Cabrini Green housing projects, a neighborhood that was at the time notorious for its high level of crime and gang-related violence. The young Rogers was no stranger to trouble, regularly getting involved in street fights and courted by gangs due to his imposing size. Rogers eventually moved to Minnesota with his grandmother, excelling in both football and basketball before taking up MMA under the guidance of head coach Mike Riley, all while working as a tire salesman for a local garage. Rogers made his pro debut in July of 2005, taking just 13 seconds to beat fellow newcomer Stan Strong before successive wins for the EFX promotion in Minneapolis. Rogers' winning streak soon caught the eye of the upstart Elite XC, who, backed by broadcaster Showtime, were looking to establish themselves as a viable threat to the UFC. Company president Gary Shaw had long been an advocate for the sport's heavier weight classes, and saw the hulking Rogers as a raw prospect to build for the future. Rogers repaid the company's faith with 2 more first-round knockouts, leading him to being booked on the opening match of the company's primetime card on CBS, the first MMA fight broadcast on network television. Rogers took just 60 seconds to beat 5-2 John Murphy, but his achievement was overshadowed by another rookie in the main event. Former Street fighter Kimbo Slice claimed a controversial win over Pride veteran James Thompson, having been dominated on the ground before a premature stoppage from Dan Murgliata. Kimbo's maligned showing caught the ire of Rogers, who challenged the Street fighter to a match during the post-fight press conference.
I'm gonna say it was garbage. You did tap out. I was right there. I mean, that sounds like a challenge, big dog.
While the media pushed for the fight to take place, Elite XC chose to keep the 2 men apart for the time being. Rogers was sidelined for the rest of the year, while Kimbo took on Ultimate Fighter reject Seth Petrozelli, who beat Kimbo in 14 seconds and sparked a chain of events that led to Elite XC folding a few weeks later. As with most Elite XC fighters, Rogers' contract was soon picked up by Strikeforce, and he was soon given a jump in quality against former UFC champion Andrei Arlovski. Arlovski was looking to bounce back from a knockout loss to Fedor Emelianenko and hoped derailing the Rogers hype train would kickstart his faltering career. His performance, however, added more fuel to the fire. While Arlovski was known for his questionable chin, few expected him to succumb to Rogers, let alone so quickly. With the win, Rogers moved to the top band of MMA heavyweights, 10 first-round knockouts in his first 10 fights, and starting to prove himself against the sport's elite. Add in the rags-to-riches story of Rogers' upbringing, Strikeforce had a potential star fall into their laps seemingly overnight. The company needed to cash in on Rogers' newfound star quickly, and what better way than a match against one of the greatest fighters of all time? In August of 2009, Strikeforce announced the signing of former Pride champion and MMA legend Fedor Emelianenko. Fedor was considered one of the pound-for-pound best fighters in the world, having been effectively unbeaten since his pro debut in 2000, but had been without a permanent home since Pride folded in 2007, taking one-off fights in Dream, Bodog, and the short-lived Affliction promotion backed by Donald Trump. So, you know it's gonna be good, right? Fedor vs. Rogers was booked for the company's November show in Chicago, ironically serving as the main event for the company's first show on CBS. While Fedor entered the match as a heavy favorite, Rogers refused to allow himself to be daunted by his legendary opponent.
Yeah, he's definitely a great fighter, you know. Obviously, he's in the #1 spot for a reason. But the way I see it, I pose as a threat. It'll definitely be a fun fight. I'm definitely going to test his chin. It might be one of those up and down situations, but when it comes down to it, you know, if he doesn't have a chin, it's a wrap.
Rogers carried that fearlessness into the fight, breaking Fedor's nose in a competitive first round and even landing some ground and pound on the last Emperor. While Fedor did just enough to win the first round, the fight wasn't the blowout many fans had expected going in. But just when they started to think an upset was on the cards,
former Project Kid from the Cabrini Green.
Rogers was finished just 2 minutes into the second round, snapping the Grim's unbeaten record in the most decisive fashion. While Fedor basked in the success of his company debut, Rogers was left to rebuild away from the spotlight. The responsibility turned to Strikeforce to give the fighter the perfect matchup to rebuild his confidence. Except they didn't. 6 months away from the Fedor fight, Rogers was given a title shot against heavyweight champion Alistair Overeem, who was making his first title defense since winning the belt 2 years earlier. An inactive champion defending his title against an opponent coming off a loss? Where have I seen that one before? While Rogers put in the legwork to argue his case for the title shot, it did nothing to change the outcome. Overeem took Rogers down almost immediately, landing sustained ground and pound until the referee stopped the match midway through the first, Rogers landing just one significant strike during the entire bout. The loss prompted Rogers to make drastic change in his personal life, relocating to Florida to train with American Top Team, hoping the Coconut Creek Gym would help alleviate his issues on the ground. Strikeforce, however, continued having faith in Rogers. In January 2011, Rogers was announced as one of the 8 participants in the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix, being paired against another former UFC champion in Josh Barnett. The new camp did little to change Rogers' fortunes as Barnett quickly took the fight to the mat before finishing him with an arm triangle choke. The loss placed serious doubts over Rogers' worthiness as an elite-level heavyweight. If the fighter was to prove his doubters wrong, it wouldn't be in Strikeforce. 2 weeks after the Barnett loss, Rogers was arrested on domestic violence charges after reportedly beating and strangling his wife before threatening to do the same to his 3 kids. Rogers pleaded guilty to 2 third-degree assault charges and was granted a 60-day prison sentence, although his wife chose not to press further charges against him. Rogers was released from his contract shortly after in one of the first acts under new boss Dana White. An ironic move given White's lax attitude to domestic violence in recent years. After alternating wins and losses on the regional scene, Rogers was given a second chance when he signed for Bellator in 2012. After beating Kevin Asplund at Bellator 71, Rogers was entered into the company's heavyweight Grand Prix, only to suffer an opening loss to future UFC contender Alexander Volkov. The gangly Russian pieced up Rogers on his way to a unanimous decision, although it was later revealed that Rogers had suffered an arm fracture midway through the fight. The match would be Rogers' last in America, as the fighter began a journeyman run in Russia, Japan, and Ecuador with limited success. Standouts from this time being a loss to current PFL champion Denis Goltsov and a first-round knockout in the ACB promotion with Ramzan Kadyrov in attendance. One wonders what the Chechen warlord would have made of Rogers' next scandal. In January of 2017, Rogers was arrested for sexual misconduct after allegedly groping 2 men in Minnesota, the first accusing Rogers of grabbing his groin in a library elevator, and the other alleging Rogers attempted to grind on him while he was using a urinal. While serving a prison sentence for his crimes, Rogers was slapped with a 3rd count after allegedly groping his cellmate while he was in his sleep, the cellmate suggesting he had failed to immediately come forward due to fear for his safety. The reports led several men to come forward accusing Rogers of similar lewd behavior, the most notable being former UFC heavyweight and current KSW champion Phil DeFries. The 2 men fought at a New Year's Eve show in Japan in 2013, with DeFries suggesting the fighter got closer than needed when they went for drinks after the fight.
We kind of took him out and he was kind of being like an asshole to all these people. And people were like, is this guy with you? And I was like, well, yeah, but no, not really, you know. And he come up to us and he started like touching us to get my attention, but it was like he was like touching my dick. I went to my mate, Dave. I went, Brett just felt me cock. He's got to get out here. And he was like, yeah, he felt mine 5 minutes ago. I was like, why didn't you say something then? He could have got us out there, you know.
With his career effectively over, Rogers' record currently stands at 17 wins and 10 losses, having won just 7 fights in the 5 years since his fight with Fedor. Brett Rogers' story is a cautionary one, a fighter whose confidence and natural power carried him to the MMA summit, but was unable to recapture the magic once his invincible aura wore off. Part of the blame also goes to Strikeforce, who in their haste for a homegrown star, booked Rogers against talent he was nowhere near ready to fight, with predictably one-sided results. Hope remains that he can return from prison a reformed member of society, but given the standard of MMA promotions in 2025, a return to the cage can't exactly be ruled out. This is the INC. Please like, share, and subscribe. Post your feedback in the comments and donate to our Patreon page for hours of exclusive content.